Hello, my name is Erin O'Mara. I'm the president of the Nation and the executive director of the Nation Fund for Independent Journalism. And it is my great honor to welcome you to the 6th Annual Student Journalism Conference. This is the first conference held under the umbrella of the Nation Fund for Independent Journalism and the second conference held virtually. The pandemic forced the switch, and in a blessing from that change, we're able to welcome a growing number of students from around the world, and we're grateful to have you here. We're grateful to the Puffin Foundation for their support from the very start and for their shared belief in the power of convening and in education to ensure the future of independent journalism. And I'd like to say a special thanks to our new sponsor, American University School of Communication. There's a team of people whose hard work and support make today possible. I'd like to thank Peter Rothberg, Associate Publisher at The Nation, and Sarah Burke, Development Director at the Nation Fund for Independent Journalism. There's a team of journalists joining us today to share their wisdom, and we thank you for your generosity. I'd also like to thank the board of the fund, Vincent McGee, Christian Mehta, Ruth Messenger, Malia Lazu, Julia Ott, Keith Mestridge, and Leah Hunt Hendricks. It's impossible for me to overstate my gratitude for your support as we build the impact of our programs. A little on how things are going to go today. There's time for questions in every session. Please put your questions and comments in the chat for our speakers to address as they come up. There are also several breaks and breakout sessions throughout the day, and you'll be able to talk to speakers and each other face to face. The breakout groups are important, and the session at 3:30 is your chance to get to know each other in small groups. The idea is for each person to talk about recent projects, articles, interviews, ideas, and share and get feedback. The groups are randomly assigned, and we're asking a Nation editor to join each. So please make sure you click on Share My Audio Video. It's a button that's going to pop up as you enter the group. And please know, the Nation Fund for Independent Journalism wants to find and nurture talent and raise up new voices. To that end, the Nation publishes more than 100 student writers each year under the Student Nation program. Samantha Schuyler from the Nation is here to answer questions on internships and writing for Student Nation, and she will be available during breaks to answer your questions. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Katrina vanden Heuvel. Katrina is the editorial director and publisher of the Nation. She started out as an intern at the Nation and served as editor of the magazine from 1995 to 2019. She writes a weekly column for the Washington Post and is a frequent guest on numerous TV and radio news programs. She's an invaluable mentor to countless journalists and activists. She will have time to take your questions today, so please get them ready and put them in the chat. And we are thrilled to have her here today. And with that, here's Katrina.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you for all you have done to make the fund possible, because I do think it's going to be an extraordinary opportunity to nurture the next generation of independent journalists who we're meeting with today. Thank you all for joining us. As Erin said, it's our second virtual. It's a time when we refuse to give up this gathering, but the Zoom has allowed us, as Erin said, to bring in people. I think we have 8 journalists from Lahore, Pakistan. We have a journalist from Russia. We have a few people from the UK and I believe Brazil. And I find one of the purposes of the Nation in many ways has been to have an international dialogue. And the internet with all its issues has allowed us to do that in great ways. So thank you for being here today. Some of you oversee larger newsrooms than the Nation. And all of you are fierce independent journalists who understand how we have to kind of fight above our pay weight in this time. We're also deeply grateful to the Puffin Foundation. I think Erin mentioned that, so much of the work we do is for mission, not profit. So we rely on those who believe in independent journalism to support us. In fact, we've had the audacity, and Erin has led this, we had the audacity in the last few weeks to sue Google. Don't laugh. It's about a very concrete issue for us, a remnant advertising. And we are in touch with those in Congress and in Europe who are taking this fight, antitrust moment, very seriously. They're eating our lunch, independent media. We have to find ways to take on these predatory behemoths. And I think there is a wave of understanding in different ways. But let me speak for a few minutes, if I might, about the nation, its history, and its present, and how it intersects with what the theme of this conference is about, this movement moment. And about our work today, some of our current writers and projects. The nation has long focused on sustaining, oxygenating, covering movements. And you are here for many reasons, but I suspect you understand the importance of movements, of the coverage of movements, and the importance of taking movements seriously, which our mainstream press, we can talk about what that is, has started to understand the importance of movements, but I would suggest doesn't cover them in ways that are demanded. They parachute in often, they want to find the leader, the conflict. We really spend time trying to understand how movements are working, the long term, the history. We meet also at a time, I don't need to tell you, of intersecting crises: health, economic, racial justice, police brutality, a time which cries out for a journalism that covers movements seriously, holds the powerful accountable, and values a politics of insurgency, of care, of a radicalism, which means going to the roots. And I think, I don't know how you feel, but I often feel we're living in a time of great promise, but also great peril. And great social movements are arising, but so, as we all know, hyper-reactionary power and the counter forces, which also demand coverage. I wake some days questioning why we do the work we do, of what purpose journalism is when the forces arrayed seem so huge against us. But I suspect you're here because I won't stop to work for change through journalism, using the pen or the pixel. And I think one of the reasons the nation has survived, it's refused to cede to despair or fear. And I wanted to quote our longtime editorial board member, Toni Morrison, who wrote in 2015, a different time, but she wrote, "This is precisely the time when artists and writers go to work. There's no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. I know the world is bruised and bleeding, and though it is important not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom, like art." That was Toni Morrison, one of the great writers of our time, who was on our editorial board for many, many years, and came when she was moved and spoke so eloquently. So the nation was founded in New York City in 1865, if you can see. It was launched by abolitionists committed to ending the scourge, the sin of our country's slavery. They believed in the power of the word. And I think it's testament to the extraordinary writers and journalists who have written for the nation that, as I said, we've survived in this fast, tricky, nanosecond changing media landscape. And unlike, I'd say, a lot of the media, we believe you forget history at your peril. We try to bring history to bear in a way that has real relevance to this time. But think for a moment that in the 1960s, our civil rights correspondent, Martin Luther King Jr., summoned the country to the fight to confront the brutal power of racism and fear with nonviolent protest. His prophetic words in our pages and around the country and world help bend the arc of that moral universe a little closer to justice. And today, Reverend William Barber of North Carolina and of the country is our civil rights correspondent in his own tradition, but in the tradition of King, a prophetic voice. And he stands on King's shoulders as he has been launching the Poor People's Campaign. And like King is committed to lifting up and deepening the leadership of those most affected by systemic racism, voting rights suppression, ecological devastation. So I said earlier what the sweet spot of the nation's survival is. It's a commitment to our mission. It's valuing rebellious voices, smart voices, informed voices, humane voices, challenging conformity, orthodoxies, conventional narratives, probing disruptive journalism, and finding you, that next generation of voices. You will meet in the first session 4 women. 3 of them were Nation interns and have moved to form their very clear, powerful voices, journalistic voices. Zoe Carpenter, Sarah Jaffe, who I have to tell you was my intern and introduced me to Twitter. She's for Michelle Chen, and Sarah Jaffe, Zoe, Michelle Chen, and Liliana Segura, who really has become an important voice in covering criminal justice. And we were very proud that she received the I.F. Stone Award this year, along with our reporter, Tim Schwab, who has done some extraordinary reporting, again, on a behemoth of our times, Bill Gates, the Bill Gates Foundation. These are very tough issues to cover, opaque, not transparent, and investigative journalism, which can bring people an understanding and break through that opacity, is invaluable, and I think, and you understand that. So I wanted to just finish by saying, you will meet today those who are in the tradition of the Nation. Ellie Mistal, our justice correspondent. I am proud that I'm the first editor who brought on a sports correspondent. Dave Zirin reminds us that sports is an entry point for conversations about race, about gender, about class. And he has a new book coming out about Colin Kaepernick and the impact of Colin Kaepernick. And you will very much enjoy hearing from both of them in conversation with our superb senior editor, Lizzie Ratner, who is also an intern. So it's that next generation. Ken Klippenstein, who was our Washington correspondent for several years, will remind you, if you don't know, of the importance of documents, of using documents to reveal corruption, reveal mendacity. And he is in conversation with our new DC correspondent, Aida Chavez, who's really working what I find important is that nexus between those in the movements and those allies inside. And there are allies like Pramila Jayapal, Jamal Bowman, Jamie Raskin, Ro Khanna. So she's doing that critical work. So, the Nation tradition is to find nurturing voices. We hope you will consider the Nation a home. As Erin said, we publish student Nation pieces. Many of them go on to be the top piece on our site. We had a fellow, Chloe Maxman, who ran the Divest from Fossil Fuel campaign at her university at Harvard. She then went on to run for office in Maine. And she is showing that you speak to the community, you work on the ground, you connect to people. And I think she will be the next, but she was a student fellow and was terrific. So I just wanted to close by saying that one of the things I take great strength in is that many of the ideas that were marginalized for decades, the minimum wage, the fight for 15, Green New Deal, Medicare for all, real criminal justice reform, reimagining policing, legalized marijuana. These were issues that the Nation, in some cases decades ago, championed. And they have now risen to be the center of debate in this country and the center of movements, activism. So in the sense of oxygenating movements, I think we are in a good place. And I think there's a key role for journalism. So I think that it's a moment when more people are organizing and fighting for a better country and truly have woken, though I'm sure you have, to the fragility of our democracy and the importance of journalism in sustaining it. So I hope you'll feel a connection to the Nation after this day and speak to those around you about our work, try to introduce them to our work, and show them all the moving parts. We have weekly conversations. We had fascinating conversation with the whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg, with two trans activists, with Reverend Barber, with Naomi Klein, a range of terrific voices you'll learn about, and tell them that the Nation is a place they can find, whether online, subscription, events, and again, ideas that movements can use. So I just want to say, I'm going to close with someone the nation endorses from time to time. In 1932, we endorsed, I don't know, go back to there, but Roosevelt, we endorsed in the following 3 elections. But in 1932, we endorsed Norman Thomas, socialist, a word that is much better known among many today, Democratic Socialists of America, so maybe some of you are members. But Norman Thomas was someone who wrote for us and we endorsed him. And he had a phrase which I've always loved, which is, there are no lost causes, only causes waiting to be won. And I think that speaks to, our work in terms of continuing to keep alive ideas and continuing to fight for movement activism of a kind that will make this a stronger place. So I thank you very much for joining today. And it's inspiring because Erin can tell you this, running a magazine is not just all big ideas, it's sustaining an institution and sustaining a place we value, but it's work. Erin, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yes, thank you. We're going to have Katrina to take some questions for about 10 minutes. So if anybody has some questions, please put them in the chat. Katrina, we have a question from Shelby Hawkins. How do you include cultural humility and historical context when covering current movements? And what is your advice for appropriately covering subject matter and or community that you are an outsider of?
That's a terrific question, Dan. I think listening is important, and I would link listening to humility. Too often, journalists come in with a set of views and impose those views without listening. And doing the research about a community, for example, that will give you, that background. I am a big believer in another sphere of life, war and peace, about the United States needing a humility agenda. There's been a triumphalism about America in the world that I think deforms our best interventions. I mean, interventions in matters of trying to stop war, bring peace. I think we do best by getting our own house in order, so to speak, before we go out and preach without humility. So I think that's the same about communities in this country. And we have had a range of wonderful reporters. One of them I won't name, who is a fine reporter for us, but in the beginning of the Trump era, we sent this reporter to rallies in the belief that it was worth listening, not condoning, but listening to what was happening at these rallies to better understand a force that can't be denied. The reporter couldn't do it, had too many of her beliefs, was so outraged, was so frightened, was so angered. So we brought another reporter who could do that kind of reporting. But the other reporter went on to do some, brilliant reporting of a different kind, which was more finding the opposition movements to Trumpism. But it's an important question, and I think it's important incumbent on the nation, which is, by the way, if you ask people, it's a left, liberal, progressive publication. But we have taken views, which I might call transpartisan. There's a consistent thread through the nation's history has been a belief that military misadventures abroad do not permit true democracy at home. And that's not a fully liberal point of view. It's something of a principled stance borne out by decades of reporting, of history, of witness.
From Austin Linfant, what's the balance between covering hyper-reactionary movements and giving them unneeded publicity? How do you keep them accountable without platforming them?
I think that is that's such an important question, and one that we're all grappling with. I wouldn't necessarily ban voices. I mean, Facebook has a different framework. I mean, it is such a behemoth. I think you need to bring context to bear. you need to bring other voices in the coverage of a hyper-reactionary movement who can speak to the roots of that movement in our history, the dangers that movement has brought to communities in our history. I do think in our journalism, there is a sensationalism. Sometimes maybe it's just part of the, cable news cycle, but it's presented as history started today. And I think it's important to give context and history, and acknowledge that such forces exist, but don't hyper-sensationalize or make it more dominant than it is.
Thank you. From Elise de Vega. I know most hate the question, but what do the nation and its writers feel about objectivity in journalism?
Again, such a good question. I don't believe there's objectivity. I think and now, by the way, many newspapers, including the Times, the newspaper of record, have much more analysis. Even in their news stories, there's more voice, so to speak. I think you have to be honest. At The Nation, as someone said, not me, you have a right to your own opinions, but not to your own facts. And I think we are in a place where we are honest. We're honest about our values, our principles. But just imagine the range of views in this country, the range of life experiences. How is there objectivity? One strives to bring a truth to bear. But I think opinion is more and more part of our news environment, and to be honest about it and not, that line of, fair. You want to be fair. I don't know about balanced, but you want to be fair. And that's our role. And I would be wise to reading the newspapers which profess objectivity with more care and think of the sourcing, think of the descriptions, which suggest there really is an objectivity.
We just have 2 more minutes before you'll introduce our next panel. And so I'll just fit one more question in from Jay Bradley. How do you work on growing an engaged audience for your work, both nationally and locally and regionally?
How do we work on growing our audience? I might throw that to you, Erin, a little bit, because we talk, Erin, we haven't been in the office in 460 days, but we talk a lot, have collective Zooms. By the way, we have a staff meeting every Thursday, an editorial check-in every day. But Erin and I talk a lot about things. How do you grow the audience engagement? Let me just say, I think some of it's new writers. Yep. Not new. Danny, for example, not a new writer, but new voices. Roberto Lovato has started writing a monthly column. He has very deep links to Latino communities. So I think you find people who have communities while always being first writer, journalist, and build out from that. But we also are quite professional in trying to connect via platforms.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we are out of time, and I see that the next panel is arriving. So Katrina, I'm gonna give it to you to introduce the next speakers.